Good afternoon, everybody. We are back. It is the Big Men on Campus podcast. I'm your host, the Big Men on Campus. We're here live on a Friday, getting you ready for yet another weekend in college sports, college basketball to be exact. A lot of bowl games going on. Nice week here between Christmas and New Year's. A lot of bowl games, but there is a lot of value and money to be made in the NCAA if you know where to look. Conference season just getting going for a lot of teams. We welcome you in here. If you're out there, hit the like button. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell anyone you think would like the show. As always, you can find me every day on sbrforum.com. I'm joined today by a guest that was on last week. People really enjoyed his stuff. He comes from VSIN, live from Las Vegas. Greg Peterson, how you doing today?
Doing great. Thank you so much for having me once again.
Yeah. We had some good picks last week. Looking forward to attacking the card here again. Welcome to all the people out there. As like I said, if you are on Twitter, hit the retweet button. Hit the like on the Twitter, on twitter.com. Make sure you spread the word on someone that might like the show. We'll answer plenty of questions here tonight and hopefully give you an edge in whatever game you decide to pick. A little bit of house cleaning here. Last night, play of the day goes down, Southern Utah. And I was talking with Greg. Him and I were talking before the show here. I told Donnie on the show this morning, I kind of wish I would have just bet the over in that game. But Southern Utah coming in 8-1 against the spread. They were at home. Tyler Hall and Harold Fry just got hot last night. What are you going to do? They go down 120 on the money line. They go down 59-36 on the season, 62% up. 19.2 units. So 1-1 on the week. We'll try to get back at it tonight. Got a play that I really like, which I've already sent out. Greg, we'll kind of attack the card like we did last week. Go over several of our games apiece. Jeff Bailey, hey, Cats look good today. Yes, they did. They absolutely hammered Louisville. Greg, did you see any of that game? What were your thoughts? Kentucky starting to really get going.
I saw some of that game, and oh my goodness, this Louisville team, they might be in danger of missing the NCAA tournament. This is a team that, other than a convincing win against Southern Illinois, has not impressed me all year long. I remember when they lost to Seton Hall at home, which obviously not a bad loss, but at the same time, need to take care of some of your business. To go down today isn't necessarily disappointing, but to go down by 29 and to allow Kentucky to score 90 points, that's extremely concerning.
Yeah, and you look at Kentucky now, all of a sudden, they're always with the Cats. It's always the cohesion concerns early on. You have all new kids. You got to really kind of get to know them and understand their game. Quaddy Green had some trouble early on, but they're really starting to look really good. Other than you lose to UCLA, which I thought that game could go either way, but you've beaten Virginia Tech lately. A big win today against Louisville. And, this Cardinal team really struggling. But you look at the offseason they had, and it doesn't really surprise many people. So Kentucky will move into their SEC play now. They get Georgia on Sunday, so that'll be a good one. Yanti Maton against that crew. If you remember last year, I believe Georgia beat Kentucky, if I'm correct, in Lexington. I got to check that. But
no, they did not. I can tell you that because it was actually Brent Musburger's last ever game.
Okay,
it was Kentucky
you're right.
In overtime.
Yeah, I wanted to say it was close, though, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah, they went to overtime in that game, so it was very close.
Yeah, you would know that. Working with Brent, you would know that. Good call. Let's move into tonight's action. Before we get into it, Greg, did you have a nice holiday?
I had a great holiday. It's nice and not cold here in Las Vegas, which it's something much needed for this guy from Wisconsin.
Yeah, no, I know. We were talking about that earlier. Yeah, we're in the deep freeze right now in the Northeast Philadelphia area. I know you're familiar with that, but must be nice to be out in Las Vegas. Plenty of nice weather out there. For sure. Caleb Ford, two of the best in the business. Thank you, man. That's very nice of you. Appreciate it. Let's get into the card. You and I both agree on this game, Greg, and it's my play of the day. You mentioned to me you like this game as well, and I'm looking to get into it here. UL Lafayette, I laid the 10.5 with the Raging Cajuns, and you look at this team out of the Sun Belt, and you look at Sun Belt. Texas Arlington's a team that comes to mind. Obviously, Georgia State with Ron Hunter and crew. But this UL Lafayette team is really good. 86 points a game, been shooting the ball magnificently all year. And they're facing a Little Rock team that I think a lot of people's first thoughts on Little Rock is that run they made in the NCAA tournament a couple years ago with Chris Beard at the helm. That team is long gone, and it was really a one-hit wonder. This team is back to mediocrity, and they're really, really struggling. You look at offensive this year, 41% from the floor, 62% from the free throw line, and 27% from three. They just really had trouble scoring all year. And I think against this team, they're really going to be at a problematic point in their season against Lafayette, who, like I said, could score with the best of them. They do run a little bit of a pressure. They do run a little bit of a zone. You would expect that they will be able to beat that all night. Bryce Washington, a really good player. And you look at what Jaqueen Grant's done for UL Lafayette, him and Frank Bartley and Stroman, who comes over from South Carolina. They've done a nice job overall. It's a really good basketball team. I look for them to be able to go on the road and really be able to handle one of the worst offenses in the country in Little Rock. Do you agree, Greg?
I completely agree with you. I could see this being a 20-point game. You mentioned the star players for Louisiana Lafayette. They brought in 3 SEC players in the offseason as transfers. That has really helped out this program. I feel like some people are fading Louisiana Lafayette a little bit because they did end their non-conference slate with a loss. And I still think there's that misnomer out there that this Little Rock team is really good because 2 years ago they went to the NCAA tournament and won a game. But in reality, this is a team that's right now 3-10 and lost their D2 Odisea. That's how bad this Little Rock team is. I think that this is going to be a bloodbath. Give me Louisiana Lafayette all day.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at some of the wins for Lafayette. Beat Iowa, beat Richmond, hung tough right with Wyoming. I believe that game was in Laramie as well. Maybe I might be wrong on that. But again, I mean, a really decent schedule so far. Did get beat up by Clemson in their last game, but keep in mind, Clemson's a pretty solid ACC team, as we know. Yeah, Little Rock is poor. And I got to tell you, if I heard someone actually mention that they like Little Rock because of 2 years ago, I might snap on them on the air. That's unbelievable that people are actually comparing that. But yeah, this seems like a no-brainer here. For me, I like to play. I think this could get ugly just because when you have a team, and it's very rudimentary, but when you have a team that scores close to 90 points a game and you're facing a team that, I mean, at times is struggling to score 60, this is really going to be a case of, I just think, men against boys out in this one. I'm really excited about this play. Give me UL Lafayette. Greg, let's move into a couple here that you like. And I want to start with a fairly interesting game out on the West Coast, 865, 866. Eastern Washington heading in to take on Northern Colorado, Jeff Linder and crew, who have had a really good season. I mean, nice start to the year for that group. We've talked about them. I think we talked about them last week. You know, and I think Eastern Washington's a team that, you look at the schedule, I mean, very difficult. I mean, the fact that they have a losing record, it makes sense. I mean, you're playing Utah and Stanford and UNLV and Washington. Are you in the notion that this might be a little too many points? I'm not sure that I see a 5-point difference between these teams. What do you think?
Yeah, my thoughts are I'm probably just going to kick back and watch this one as a fan because my power rankings has this as a Northern Colorado game at about 3, maybe 3.5. So, I mean, this is going to be a really tough game. And as you mentioned, Eastern Washington has played just a brutal schedule, which was filled with power conference teams. I know that they had to play Stanford. That was a pretty good battle that they had. I remember they played against San Francisco. They got down early. They made a big run in the second half, nearly covered that game. So, and you take a look at Northern Colorado. They are coming off a really close but no cigar game against UNLV in which they lost by something like 2 or 3 points. They were in that game throughout. Jeff Linder doing a great job with Northern Colorado. This team has been covering a lot this year. So this is one where I just want to kick back, see what's happening with these two teams, and then bet this conference based on what I see from this game, just trying to get more information tonight from this game.
Yeah, no, I think you make a ton of sense there. I mean, I had a hard time seeing a 5 or 6 point difference between these two. I mean, I feel like if you're going to look at this game, and maybe I'm nuts, but maybe just look at the outright win if you like Eastern Washington. These teams are fairly similar. I know Eastern Washington has had some concerns this year shooting the basketball overall, but they're still usually a very good offensive team. And I think this is a pretty interesting conference all of a sudden. I mean, you have the Southern Utahs of the world that have really kind of turned it up. Northern Colorado, you got Montana State, Montana. Weber always very good. North Dakota's played well. Portland State. This is all of a sudden a very interesting conference, a conference that I've had a lot of luck in generally. I've usually made some good money with the North Dakotas and some of the overs in this conference. Then you have teams you can really beat up on in Sac State and Northern Arizona and Idaho State. It's a pretty fun conference out here, Greg, in the Big Sky. Definitely a conference. And you know what I like about this conference as well, for any fan out there, most of these games you can watch for free online just by going to the Big Sky website.
Yeah, that's really nice that you're able to watch all those games. And I do agree with you. There are tons of teams in this conference that you really like to bet on. I mean, Portland State right now 10-0 against the spread. That's completely unheard of. We saw them last week just completely beat the snot out of California on the road. They also won in that PK80 game against Stanford, in which they were pretty much playing in front of a home crowd. But still, to beat a Pac-12 squad in what's considered a neutral court game, very impressive. So I really think that this Eastern Washington versus Northern Colorado game is one where you just want to gain some more knowledge, because the Big Sky has been profitable for you. I can tell you I've had some good luck with it as well. So just try to get some knowledge tonight, know what you're betting, and then you can go from there.
I tell people all the time, people say to me, why don't you go out and do stuff? Why don't you go out and do this and that? A lot of the time, I just spend time watching games like this where I can learn something down the road. And I'm not surprised at the end of the season. You look at Northern Colorado, it's 2 games. Okay, you beat Wyoming in Laramie, and then you go on the road into Las Vegas and play right with UNLV. 2 impressive teams here. Should be an interesting game. I would watch strictly for notes purposes for sure. Good pick here, Greg, in picking this one out. It is all over, by the way, down in Charlotte. Wake Forest outlast Texas A&M in a wild game, about a 4.5-hour game here. It looks like 55-52. What a bowl game this one was. About time, Greg. As you know, the bowl season hasn't been particularly good, I feel like, in most of these games. But let's move on. A game that I talked about earlier on my show at 10 a.m. is I get a feeling going to see a ton of fireworks. Talk about a high-scoring football game. This is, in my opinion, going to be a pretty high-scoring basketball game. I mean, is there any reason Iona and Niagara doesn't fly over the total tonight? I mean, both these teams is kind of a perfect storm, if you will, for points. I mean, Niagara plays little to no defense at all. They have 2 of the higher scoring players in the country. Dukes and Scott have been fantastic. They're not good at all in transition. And if you've watched Iona over the years, you would know that Iona's particularly strong in transition. It's just a terrible matchup. This reminds me a lot of last night's Montana State Southern Utah game. Both these teams very good from the free throw line. Both these teams very good from 3, and both shoot a pretty high percentage. It's hard to envision this one isn't, 95-85 or something. Is there any reason to think this one won't be high scoring, Greg?
I really can't think of one. The only thing I can think of is that Iona isn't quite scoring as many points this year as they have in past years. But I think a lot of that is due to the schedule. Iona had to play a bunch of very difficult teams in the non-conference, like teams like Syracuse, who plays that zone, which is very hard to get accustomed to until the second half. So Iona did play against a bunch of defensive-oriented teams. That's why they're more in the middle of the row in terms of points per game this year, instead of being a team that's averaging like 80 to 85. So I'm probably not going to take the over in this one, but I'm certainly not taking the under. That's for sure. I want to see how Iona comes out in the first game or two of Metro Atlanta competition, just see where they're at, and then see if it was more, the lack of scoring was a little bit more due to the schedule that they were playing or due to the actual roster that they have right now.
Here's why I like Greg, people. I'm going to tell you exactly why I like Greg Peterson. This is why I like him. Because when I asked him that question, I had a feeling he would say something along the lines of, well, if you look at their schedule, they played – listen to this, Greg. They've played Albany, Syracuse, Fairleigh Dickinson, Yale, Holy Cross, St. John's, Rhode Island. What do all those teams, Northern Kentucky, what do all those teams do for the most part? Play slow, defend pretty well. You look at the one game. This is a really interesting, fascinating point. You look at the one game where they had to play an up-tempo basketball team, Ohio, who I believe is top 10 in pace per game as far as the amount of plays they run. 93-88. So a pretty fascinating game here. They haven't really been able to play like they want to. And I think the problem for Niagara here is they're going to suit them tonight and play that way. That's where for me, and I'm glad Greg was able to uncover that. Greg, that's why I like you. You're able to uncover things like that. Good work. Let's move on to a game that you wanted to talk about. And I think a lot of the listeners are going to be interested in this one as well. You get Texas Arlington heading into Conway to take on the Coastal Carolina shot the clears and Cliff Ellis. What do you like here, Greg? Texas Arlington -4.
I like UT Arlington in this game. I actually saw a couple 3.5s out there too. So if you're able to get UT Arlington -3.5, I would say jump on it because I don't think it's going to be around for too long. UT Arlington, once again, doing a very good job against the spread. We saw them play a very close game against Alabama earlier this year. They were able to knock off BYU in Provo. That very rarely happens. They had a little bit of a struggle at the beginning of the year against Loyola Marymount, but this is a team that night in, night out has been getting the job done. Kevin Hervey is probably going to be playing in the NBA next year. Guy can just score it in so many different ways, has very good size. And the guy that people really forget about with this team, Eric Neal. He is a guy who's in the top 5 in the nation in assists per game, does a very good job of keeping the offense flowing smoothly. This is a UT Arlington team that goes a bit more up-tempo, whereas Coastal Carolina, they're not a team that really likes squads that do go up-tempo. I know like Coastal Carolina has been playing a bunch of close games lately, but I really like UT Arlington. The past couple years, they've done very well in Sun Belt play, with the exception being in the 2015-2016 season when they were playing without Kevin Hervey for much of Sun Belt play. Last year, they were very good in the conference. I think that will continue. I think that -4/-3.5 with UT Arlington is a great play tonight.
Yeah, I will point out, obviously, Greg, the lucky one lives out in Vegas. Keep in mind, actually every offshore book has 4, but if you can get a 3.5, that's key out there. I do want to make a point also. I liked your point about Neal. I think Neal is an amazing point guard. I think he's a guy that, really him and Hervey have a great rapport together. But I was interested to see, I know they got Johnny Hamilton in there. He's been a nice rim protector for them, a guy they didn't have last year. They had, if you remember, they had the kid named Bilbao, Jorge Bilbao.
Yep.
Yeah, kind of a 6'9", kind of, not a huge kid, just kind of a bruiser, did the little things. But Johnny Hamilton is a huge kid, a 7-foot kid, big wingspan. But the player that I really like is, I like this third scoring option in senior guard Kalen Wilson. 5 straight double-digit scoring games, really has come in and given them really valuable minutes. I mean, if you remember, Kevin Neal in the game against Creighton didn't play early on. He was out in the game against Rio Grande. He's been able to come in, Wilson, and really kind of give them a third scoring punch. As many know, I'm a big fan of this Arlington team. I like them a lot. The only concern I had for this game when Greg and I were talking was the line and how it really hasn't moved. And, people have really been bought into this Texas Arlington team. They've been a good road team, as I've mentioned. Greg, you mentioned to me you have a thought on that. What do you think about that?
I've noticed this has happened a lot with UT Arlington games in that there are a bunch of sharp people that are betting either for or against UT Arlington, because in these games, there's typically a lot of one-sided action, and yet the line isn't moving a whole heck of a lot. And typically, the public has been correct on so many of these games this year, because you take a look at that Loyola Marymount game. The sharps were all over UT Arlington. UT Arlington was not even close to covering that game. Then they play against BYU. It seemed like all the money in that game was on BYU. UT Arlington gets the outright win. So it's just one of those things where I think the sharps think they have a lot of information on UT Arlington, when in reality they don't.
Yeah, UT Arlington 7-3 to the number this year, 4-1 on the road, ATS. So yeah, they've been a real, a wet dream, if you will, for bettors if you've been betting on them. A really solid team. I hope they finally get up and over the hump this year and get into the tournament. I think people deserve to see Hervey and Neal. And if you haven't seen them, check them out tonight, ESPN 2. Neal and Hervey are an amazing duo. Yeah, exactly. Kansas is getting D'Souza back at the perfect time. Need that size to battle Texas. Yeah, that's not on their sheet here, but I did want to discuss that. I've mentioned before with Mo Bamba. I've watched Mohamed Bamba for the last 2 years. I saw him when he was at Westtown School in Westchester, Pennsylvania. He's a brittle kid. I mean, it's the truth. I mean, he's skinny. He's not a big kid as far as weight's concerned. And, he is a really hyper-aggressive, athletic big. I mean, he's absolutely amazing size-wise, length, and he'll be great at the next level. But the concern I have is, and I've mentioned this, the bigger kids in the Big 12, which, Greg, I have to ask you, you would agree that this is the best conference in the country, right?
Oh, in terms of top to bottom, this conference is loaded. We could easily see 7 or 8 teams go to the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And you meant one of the listeners mentioned D'Souza coming in, which is huge. If we remember, I mean, Billy Preston hasn't played yet for this team, and it's kind of been frustrating. I like Billy Preston, liked him when he was in high school. I thought he was a really good fit at Kansas. It's a shame we haven't get to see him yet. But as a Buki is a big, big kid, and I gotta be a little concerned for Bamba tonight. This is not a particularly good matchup. If you remember against Duke, Bamba had a lot of trouble for the most part against Bagley, which seemingly everyone does. But we've also talked about Texas's inability at times to score in a half court. They're a pretty ugly team to watch. Public likes Kansas here. Do you have any opinion on this one?
If I were to bet this one, I've stayed off of this one, but I would probably go with Kansas as well. I'm just not buying into this Texas team because they have no three-point shooting, especially with Andrew Jones out. I mean, how are they going to get points against a Kansas team that really likes to go up-tempo? We've seen them score 90 points night in and night out. How are they going to be able to score in this game? They're not going to be able to keep up. I could easily see this being a double-digit Kansas win.
Yeah, no, I actually really agree with you in this one. Again, I love Kansas at home generally, but I've made the comment. I think Kansas is a team that can win the whole thing this year. I have them at a nice price. I like the cohesion. I like the mix of young players and veterans. They have a pretty deep team as well. People are coming eligible. I like Kansas a lot. This is a big time game. They need to go on the road and win. A good slate, by the way, in the Big 12 tonight. Let's get into another game that you're looking at here, Greg. What is your next game? Siena and Marist. An interesting game. The MAC, kind of that New York, New Jersey, Connecticut area. What are you thinking here? These schools separated, but not far. Poughkeepsie and Albany. What do you think here in Siena Marist?
I really like Siena in this game. I got him at -2. It is now -3, but I definitely advocate laying the 3 points in this one.
Hey, Greg.
Marist had one win so far this year. I mean, we all remember Marist had a big comeback against West Virginia, but I think that was more or less smoke and mirrors. And I remember they had one kid that just hit like 8 threes. It was absolutely ridiculous. Marist just got really lucky in that game. They then lose.
Greg, let me ask you something before you get into your breakdown, because I know you're going to mention this. Would you agree that Siena is the best 9-loss team in the country?
Oh, yes. They have played
you look at all their losses. They're against all good teams.
I mean, it's been absolutely insane. And a lot of those games have been close as well. I still remember when they played against Hofstra, they just completely overwhelmed it with a barrage of threes. Nico Clarith is a very good player. And this is a Siena team that actually made the Metro Atlantic Conference final last year in the tournament last year. I believe that they forced that game to overtime against Iona as well, if I remember correctly. So this is a very solid Siena team. They've got some good three-point shooting. They've got a couple guys that they can go to down low. And Marist is a team that you just don't want to bet on. Let's be honest here. Marist is one of the bottom 15, 20 teams in the country. I mean, this is Siena all day for me.
Yeah, I remember last year and the last couple of years, they've had a player named Khalid Hart. He was pretty good. He could drop like 25. But other than that, I mean, they just haven't had much talent up at Marist. And I agree with you. I'm a big fan of Patsos, always have been. I like his energy. He's always a guy that, once you rebound the basketball, do some of the little things. And you mentioned Clarith. He's had a little bit of a weird career at Siena, but him and Asante Shivers are pretty good, and I agree with you in this play. I think betting against Marist is always a pretty strong predicament. I actually I bet against them last week with that Brown game, and Brown hammered them. Question on is Issa Ahmed back for West Virginia? I believe he is. I have to look at that. I'm not sure. Huggins hasn't said much about it. Billy Hahn, he hasn't said much about the assistant coach there. I have to see. That's a good question. I'll have to look. I would imagine he would be after all the all the transfers and stuff. That stuff's all official, and the academic stuff. Greg, I have a game that I'm interested in, kind of lower on the totem pole, but a game that might present some value. And if you've listened to me before, you might know where I'm going here. It's down really close to the bottom on most of the odd sites. It's UMBC and Maryland. Baltimore County against Maryland. You can get 17.5 in this game. I'm kind of looking towards the Retrievers here if I can. Jarius Lyles is a fantastic player. He's a guy that can drop 30 on you if you're not looking. And this team right now, Maryland's a little hobbled. Justin Jackson out for the season. He's their best rebounder. That's a big loss for Turgeon's group. I mean, Deion Wiley's been hurt. Michael Tchaikovsky's been hurt as well. And the Baltimore Sun actually did a really good article on, I don't know if you've read this, Greg, but it's an interesting read if you can get a chance. The injury history that Turgeon has dealt with in his career at Maryland, it's quite amazing how many guys have gotten injured under his tutelage. He's just been very unlucky, really, for as long as I can remember. I like UMBC here. The teams that I look out for, can you stay in a game when you're getting a big number like this? I mean, UMBC is one of the better three-point shooting teams in the country. They have 4 players at 45% or better from the field, three-point field. They're a very good foul shooting team for the most part, around 70%. Not amazing, but pretty good. I think they could stay in the game with some threes. This is a lot of points. They hung with SMU, hung for like 3/4 of the game against Arizona. And if I can remember correctly, at one point that was a pretty close game against Arizona in Arizona. I kind of like at UMBC today. What do you know about them, Greg? And is this too many points for them tonight against Maryland?
I was about to bring up how well they played against Arizona. Like you said, they hung in there for 3/4. I think they were down like 6 with something like 8 or 10 minutes to go. I mean, They were very competitive in that game. And what people forget about UMBC is 2 years ago, I believe that this was a 4 or 5 win team. They had a huge turnaround last year to be able to get back over 500, and they're doing a very good job. The new coach that they brought in, he's in his second year, has really turned around UMBC. They should be one of the better teams in their conference out there in the America East. They should be right there with Albany. I would say that they're probably still a notch below the likes of Stony Brook, but they're getting right there. They should be a very good team in that conference. And you know what? Maryland, like you said, they've had tons of injuries. I didn't read that specific article that you were talking about, but I do know that year in and year out, you can always depend on a couple players from Maryland getting injured, and that's just the reality of it right now with Justin Jackson out for the year. It's going to be hard for them to adjust because this is like their first or second game without Justin Jackson, so you have to think that they're going to be trying out some new things in this game, and that could allow UMBC to hang within 10.
Yeah, Lyle's 22 points a game. He's a kid that, if you follow this program at all, I mean, he's been there for a while. And you're right, Ryan Odom's done a really good job with this group. They're 9th in the country in 3-point percentage per game. So, and this is that big brother, little brother matchup. You got the kids that were 2- and 3-star recruits that, probably moved around a couple times, and, playing a game against the big boys from College Park, it's not ever a bad thing. You kind of go from Baltimore City out to the suburbs to play College Park and Big Bend, Maryland. So on a Friday night, you'd have to figure that they'll be very motivated in this game. Looking forward to it. Hopefully, this was a close one for me. I considered a play of the day. I'm trying to stay to that one game a day, but this one was real close for me here. Greg, what else do you got tonight? Any other games you're looking at?
I know that this is a game you were looking at as well. I'm really curious to see what happens in this Washington versus USC game. USC had a big bounce back in Hawaii. They were able to get that just miraculous cover against New Mexico. I mean, for all of you guys that tailed my USC -4.5 pick, you got a very nice Christmas present because that game was tied with about 10 seconds to go. Benny Boatwright hits the 3. Then they fell USC. They are able to cover at the free throw line with Meadow hitting both free throws, so that was nice. And then you have a Washington team that's really been up and down this year. I mean, Washington was pounded and won their games in which they played out there in that 2K Classic. I remember they hung with Providence, and then I believe they played Virginia Tech and then just got smacked around. They took a bad loss when they played against Gonzaga by double digits. But this is also a team that was able to knock off Kansas when they were a 21-point underdog in that game. So I'm really curious to see what happens here. I really don't have a play on this one. This is being played at USC, so I thought the number should have been right around 9 or 10. Right now it's sitting at USC -10, so this is going to be one of those watch and observe games for me.
Yeah, they're kind of a bipolar team, this group. I mean, they beat Kansas, and then they lose to Montana. So it's like and I had them against Montana. It was pretty pathetic to watch, really.
They actually won the game, but they didn't cover.
Yeah, no, it was brutal. I mean, they're a weird team. I actually talked with this game as well earlier, and I kind of like the over, frankly. I mean, I feel like USC shouldn't have any trouble against this zone. And this USC group has struggled at times. We know that Washington can move up and down the court. They could score the ball, but it's just an interesting game for the most part. Is it too many points? I would agree with you. Probably 9 or 10 is a good number. Washington, a quick team, 70th in possessions per game. They're going to get up and down. USC with plenty of athletes as well. Could be kind of a shit show, if you know what I mean. We look to some of the questions here, see if there's any people out there that have a point they want to make. Where are we going here? Maryland comes to East Lansing next week. Can't wait. Kyle Honeyset must be a Michigan State. Oh, yeah, you are a Michigan State fan. That's right. Any take on Baylor tonight? Keel's out for the foreseeable future. I know Leonard Freeman's back, I think. Anything on Baylor? I didn't look a ton into this game tonight. Baylor and
Texas Tech.
Yeah, Tech, good call. What do you got on this? Anything?
This would probably be Texas Tech or pass for me, but I see the number on Texas Tech is really ticking up. This opened at 6. I'd probably like Texas Tech at 6, but it's now sitting at 8. This is now just a stay away for me because Baylor is one of those teams that they're going to defend you coming off the bus. Meanwhile, Texas Tech, they seem to be getting a little bit more up and down. We've seen Texas Tech play some very good basketball this year, and I still remember the beatdown that they put on Northwestern on the road. That was very impressive. So right now, this is one of those games that I would stay away from. Maybe you take Texas Tech on a flyer, but that's something I have little to no confidence in. Yeah,
I hear on that. I know Jordan Bernardo's back for Troy tonight. They need him back bad. That's a nice sign for that group. What else do we have here? Toledo in a dogfight with Penn at the Palestra on a little matinee basketball. That one's interesting. Utah-Oregon's pretty interesting. Utah laying a pretty big number to Utah, who I know is battling some injuries right now. Collette, I believe, is a little hobbled and everything. But this is a kind of a dangerous number to give a pretty good Utah team. But I'm a more or less fan of backing Utah in Salt Lake City as opposed to on the road. Oregon seemingly hasn't gotten it figured out yet this year. Seems like one too many points here, doesn't it?
It does seem like a little bit too many points. I would either go Utah or pass. This game opened at 9.5. It's now ticking up to 10.5 in most spots around here in Las Vegas. So, if you can get 10.5, I'd probably take it with Utah. And Oregon is a team that they've dealt with some injuries themselves. I know that Troy Brown missed that game in which they played against Boise State. Boise State hits at half quarter and ends their long win streak. But I will say Oregon in Eugene is a very, very tough team. The crowd there is rowdy. I actually used to cover Oregon athletics last year when I used to work out in Portland, so I know a lot about this team. This is one that I'm not going to bet personally, but if I were to play it, Utah with the points would definitely be the best play.
Yeah, Justin Bibbins has been a nice addition for this team, coming over from Long Beach. He's been a nice add. I might be looking at this one late night. By the way, a solid 11 everywhere for UL Lafayette, which is a good sign. When we have a game like this, you want to see the line kind of move upwards, not down. By the way, with UL Lafayette, one of the most amazing stats I've seen with this team, they have 8 players that are averaging 7 or more points. That's pretty impressive. This is a real impressive team. I hope they come out with, I always like the first conference game. I don't know about you. I always like the first conference game. It's kind of like going to school, the first day of school. Everybody's, if I can quote The Wire, I don't know if you've ever seen The Wire, the best TV show ever. In the one of the seasons, it's about the school system, and one of the kids walks in school and goes, and I know if you've watched The Wire, you can remember this scene. The kid goes, I love the first day of school. Everybody's all friendly and shit. It was a great scene. If you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. That's how I look at conference play. It's good if you're winning. It's good if you're a good team. You look forward to it to kind of state your case, if you will. I really look forward to this play tonight with UL Lafayette. I feel good about it. Let's do one or two more, and then we'll wrap it up here. We've fired through a lot of games here, a lot of great information. What else do we have here? Greg, fire one off. I know you got one more or two in you. What do you got?
Colorado versus Oregon State is going to be an interesting one. Oregon State opened up -3.5. Now they're laying 5 or 4.5 in some spots. So I think that Colorado might actually be the better play. I have this one as more of a Colorado +2, +2.5 sort of game. Oregon State has failed to impress me all year long. I remember when they played that just ugly game against Long Beach State at home a couple weeks ago. Then they played that this is a game that's buried into a dumpster fire, never dug back up when they played against St. Louis. that was one of the worst college basketball games I've seen all year. Nobody hit a free throw. Nobody could defend. There was nothing going on. Nobody was hitting shots. It was one of the worst games I've ever seen. So, that could be a spot where you look at Colorado plus a 5 if you're able to get it.
Yeah, I've not been impressed with this team, Oregon State. I thought they'd be a lot better this year. I actually made the bad mistake of betting on them at Kent State a couple weeks ago before Christmas. Very disgusting game there. You got to wonder when Wayne Tinkle will get it figured out there. I know you kind of give him a pass because his kid was out last year, but, you've been less than impressive so far. Yeah, I kind of like that one myself. Idaho, North Dakota, someone's asking about here. Idaho's been pretty impressive lately, and North Dakota can't defend anybody, it seems like. Anything on the Big Sky here?
I really like Idaho as a team. Victor Sanders is the best scorer in the nation. I think that this number is –
Wow, really?
So,
you think?
Wow. He's been one of the better scorers in the nation, I should say, because he averaged over 20 points per game last year. And this number has actually ticked down from 5 to 3. I had this one right around 3 to 3.5. North Dakota is a team that, keep in mind, took Gonzaga to overtime on the road too, though. So that's something to keep in mind. This is one where I just really want to gain more information on the Big Sky. This is very reminiscent of Northern Colorado versus Eastern Washington for me.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. It's definitely good early on to do that with some of these teams. We got someone in the chat asking about listen, I wouldn't be betting a lot of these added games right now. You're really close to the end of the season here as far as the added games. He's asking about Florida A&M. They're getting a big number. Florida A&M is a MEAC school that plays literally everyone that they can. That's how they fund their basketball program and their sport program as well. Ball State's actually pretty good. And you look at some of these scoring outcomes for Florida A&M, their only win is against Albany State, a college out of Georgia. They faced a who's who in mid-major basketball, and none of which were really close. Listen, I got to be honest with you, Kyle Honey said, I'm not sure why you're looking at this game. There's a ton more games on the card. Get ready for tomorrow. I wouldn't involve yourself with, do you think Ball State could cover a big number? Why on earth would they care about this game? If they win by 20 or they win by 40, if they win by 13, does it really matter? This game's absolutely useless to them. Is Andrew Rousey from Marquette the best shooter in the Big East? I would say so, probably. I like some of the Villanova guys. Creighton has some high-level shooters, but yeah, Rousey's pretty impressive. The other night he was really good in that game against Xavier. Marquette's a good team. They're you kind of look at the Big East, and I've made the case that while I don't think anyone will beat Villanova, the conference is kind of just, to me, a little bit more down, just because I don't think there's anyone of Villanova's level. But overall, as people get healthy, Providence is going to get better, and these teams are going to get better. Rousey's a really good shooter. I would agree with that. Sure. That's it looks like all the games. We went over most of them here. Penn's defense is atrocious. Well, I hope you win, man. I hope you win. Greg, always good stuff, man. Why don't you review your plays here, and then we'll get you off.
Certainly. For my plays today, we went with UT Arlington -4 against Coastal Carolina. Like I said, if you could find a -3.5, because there's a couple around Vegas, certainly take those. And then my other big play today was Siena -2, now -3 against Marist. I think that's a lead pipe lock. We're both agreeing on Louisiana Lafayette laying 11 against Little Rock. I think that Louisiana Lafayette should cover that easily. And then I really want to see what happens in the Eastern Washington versus Northern Colorado game. Try to get some knowledge. Try to get a little bit smarter as Big Sky play begins.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. For me, I get 10.5 on that Lafayette game. That's my play of the day tonight. Also looking at Iona Niagara over the total. I like UMBC plus 17.5. I feel like that's a pretty fun one. There's some games surely to watch tonight. I have my eye on Texas Arlington. I have my eye on Siena. I'll probably tail them just because I do respect Greg a lot and I like his plays. Greg, as always, great stuff. We look forward to talking to you again. I know Friday is a good day for you to come on. We'll try to get you on as more as we can. When can we hear you on VSIN, and what do you have going on over there?
You can hear me every Tuesday at 7 o'clock Eastern, 4 o'clock p.m. Pacific. I always do a spot with Ron Flatter and Amal Shaw, two of the best in the business. We always talk some college basketball. I do a lot on the weekdays as well. I frequently am on the edge with John Von Tobel and Matt Humans talking some college basketball. Those are a little bit more sporadic, but you can hear me a lot on VSIN. And then I'm going to be doing a lot more for the VSIN website as well, vsin.com. We're coming out with my power rankings from 1 to 351 and how every team would fare on a neutral court if they played each other.
Yeah, I want to give for a minute here, just talk about Greg just for one moment. I've made a comment before that there are not many people in this business that I feel know what I know in this business, but Greg is one that I think may or may not know more than me. It's refreshing to talk to someone that knows college hoops. There aren't many of them. There are a dime a dozen. There's probably 3 or 4 people in this business in college basketball that I give a flying fuck what they think. He's one of them. Greg does a very good job. Greg, I have to ask, the 351 teams, that's something that I actually did. I didn't power rank them, but I did go over every team before the season, back in the summer and stuff. But I do have a question for you. First time you met Brent Musburger, how did that go?
It was very interesting because I was driving down to Vegas. I was coming from Portland. I actually blew out a tire in my final 100 miles. So when the host got wind of that, so we were just talking about car stories for the first time. So it was very funny. And then second time I met him, I was wearing a Green Bay Packers shirt, and we just got talking about Wisconsin. Brent is a very fun, outgoing guy, just very polite to everyone that he meets out there in the sports book. So just refreshing to see people that have been around for so long and are so respected actually take the time and just be friendly to people.
Yeah, I real quick before we go, I do want to make the case that the time when he discussed Catherine Webb with Kirk Herbstreit might have been one of the better moments in college. I mean, that was great. I mean, the way because he said literally what we were all thinking. It's like, and I don't think he did anything wrong. He said, what a beautiful woman. I agree wholeheartedly with him. I thought it was great stuff. He was truly on one with that one. And then his interview with Eminem was quite interesting in the box at one time, which was interesting to say the least. But yeah, he's a legend for sure. It's nice to hear stories like that. As always, Greg, good stuff. Hopefully we'll talk to you real soon. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yep. See you, buddy. Greg Peterson joining us live from Las Vegas. Always very good information. I'm happy to hear. Let's listen to Brent. You know what I find interesting about that whole thing is how come we never heard about Kirk Herbstreit? I mean, his comment wasn't any better. I mean, AJ's doing some things right down there in Alabama. I don't think it's any different from what Brent said. Brent took all the shit in that one. Kirk just sat back and said, they got him and not me. But overall, very funny as always. That's it for me. I'll be back tomorrow. Check me out, SBRpicks.com, SBR YouTube page, 10 o'clock a.m. Ian Cameron and I will go over the Saturday College Hoops card. We'll also at noon go over the 6 bowl games tomorrow. A couple of the guys, as always, over there will be fun as always. Everyone have a great night. Enjoy your Friday evening. Be safe. Bundle up if you're on the East Coast. Play of the day for me on UL Lafayette -10.5. Everyone have a great night. I'll see you next time on the Big Men on Campus podcast. Bye-bye.